What's up guys, it's me Jeremy, and today I've got my support tier list for solo queue. Note that solo queue is very different in competitive play, and thus should be seen differently. The champions I consider to be a possible support pick are as follows: Taric, Lulu, Sona, Leona, Janna, Soraka, Nunu, Lux, Fiddlesticks, Nami, Thresh, Blitzcrank, Alistar, Gangplank, Zilean, Zyra, Morgana, Elise, Karma, Nidalee, and Syndra. Any other champions are not actual support picks. For example, people often ask me about Pantheon or Volibear support, but those aren't really supports, they're kill lanes. Or for example, supports like Ashe, who form a double carry lane, which is almost the same as a kill lane except worse, as your champions don't really synergize and they won't function as well with less gold. So those kinds of champions don't make this list. I've divided the list into 3 tiers. Any champion on tier 1 is a strong pick in a majority of comps and matchups and situations. These champions are strong at carrying a team and are usually hard to play against, as they excel in solo queue. Any champion on tier 2 is a strong pick but has weaknesses, often having bad matchups or bad mechanical matchups, meaning that they are hard to play and easy to play against. They also are not as good at carrying a team in comparison to other supports. These supports are strong picks by themselves, but are often outclassed by some of the supports in tier 1. Any champion on tier 3 is generally a poor pick. These picks only really work in a few very specific situations, and even then, they're still somewhat poor picks, and pretty much never picked as supports anyways. However, since it is solo queue, you can do well with any pick. They are just a little weaker than the other options. Note the champions on tier 2 or tier 3 are not considered bad picks. They're often just niche picks, or picks that are outclassed, not necessarily bad or troll, despite what your teammates might tell you. Also, since this is solo queue, you can make any pick work, as explained earlier, just by outplaying your opponents. But this is of course a list judged on a basis as if everyone playing those picks was of equal skill. I'll start from the bottom of tier 3 and move up, and note that champions in each tier are ranked as well, not simply just classified into tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So let's jump right into it. Starting with the worst solo queue support, which I have given to Syndra. Syndra is pretty weak throughout almost all points of the game, and is outclassed by really just any support. Her level 6, while decent, is poor compared to a lot of commonly picked supports, and that makes her weak at what is pretty much her strongest point in the game. Also, Syndra's utility is poor, so she has a hard time contributing to teamfights, especially during the late game. After Syndra comes Karma. Karma has the lowest win rate of any champion in solo queue right now, and that's because she has the huge problem of not having enough utility to be a good support, and not having enough damage to be a good AP mid. So she is really just stuck in this limbo where she's useless in every single role. She is still a little bit better than Syndra though, because she has a better late game. Next is Gangplank. Gangplank used to be a lot stronger, but he's become outclassed in almost every single aspect of his play by other supports now. His ultimate is solid though, but it's very hard to use in solo queue because there is that lack of communication, so he's not that strong of a pick. After Gangplank comes Zilean. Zilean's damage can carry a lane phase in solo queue if you outplay your opponents, but in all actuality his real lane phase is kind of terrible though, because he has no good matchups. His ultimate is actually very strong late game in solo queue though, since people don't really know how to play against it. So it can make for some clutch plays, but he's put on tier 3 because he is pretty much useless except for his ultimate, his E, and his passive. On the top of tier 3 we have Nidalee support. Nidalee having high base damages makes her lane phase decent, and can actually be kind of powerful as she does have some decent matchups. But she's not that great in teamfights because of her poor utility, so I've put her at the top of tier 3. Now, moving on to tier 2. And these are picks that are often better, and often simply just not considered troll picks by your team. At the bottom of tier 2 is Soraka. While Soraka is very easy to play, she's also extremely easy to play against, and is really just average at all stages during the game, having only a few good matchups and a lot of bad ones. She is really just an average support in solo queue right now, especially as it's hard to snowball a lane with her, so it makes it really hard to carry a game as Soraka. After Soraka comes Nami. Nami suffers a situation where she is hard to play and extremely easy to play against, as all of her skills are very slow and easy to dodge, as well as her damage being not that great, causing her to have a lot of bad matchups. Her ultimate can make for some decent teamfights though, but overall, like Soraka, she's kind of just average. Following Nami is Fiddlesticks. Even though Fiddlesticks is actually a fairly strong pick, the reason why he's placed so low is because he's very hard to play with. His kit is kind of hard to predict, and while it is strong at all stages of the game, it does have some slight weaknesses, for example that he's squishy, and many players will not be used to playing with him, and that greatly outclasses the fact that people don't know how to play against him. And this is a recurring theme for a lot of the supports in tier 2 that are strong, but still stuck in tier 2. However, a lot of these supports will perform extremely well if you can execute them with a good duo queue partner. Following Fiddlesticks is Elise, who suffers the same issues. Elise is a fairly solid support because of the HP stacking going on right now, not to mention that she's one of the few supports that actually has mobility, but she suffers hugely from reliability issues and the fact that people don't know how to play with her, and she is a fairly untested pick in solo queue, so she's stuck in tier 2 for now. After Elise is Morgana. Her binding is a very strong ability in solo queue, and she would be much higher on this list if not for the fact that her spell shield is kind of a terrible ability in solo queue, because everyone always forgets about it, or doesn't play with it properly, etc. Once again, people don't really know how to play with her, but she can still be okay because her binding is a very solid spell. Second place in tier 2 is Thresh. Since Thresh is an extremely untested pick at the moment, this placement may not be accurate, and he could be higher or even lower in just a month of time. However, while Thresh's kit is very powerful in solo queue, especially his grab and knockback, it suffers similar issues to Morgana in that his Lantern is a very poor spell, as people on your team will not use it properly. So I think this is a fairly solid estimate for his placement. At the top of tier 2 is Janna. Janna used to be the best support for solo queue, but has since become much weaker due to the meta shifts and her nerfs. She still has very high utility though, and is very annoying to play against, as she's extremely good at protecting an AD carry, making her teamfights fairly strong. But her laning phase has become absolutely weak right now, and laning phase is much more important in solo queue than it is in competitive play, so she lands a spot at the top of tier 2. Now onto the tier 1 supports. These supports are strong picks and are good choices to invest time into to get good with, or to purchase to try to rise in the solo queue ladder. Starting at the bottom of tier 1, we have Alistar. Alistar used to be much stronger, but slight nerfs in combination with the meta shifts have made him much worse, as he can now be easily kited by a lot of other supports, giving him a lot of bad matchups. However, his combo is still really powerful and his teamfights are pretty good, so he lands a spot on tier 1. After Alistar, I have actually placed Zyra. I think Zyra is very weak in solo queue right now if you compare it to how strong she is in competitive play, and this comes from the fact that she is a burst oriented support that is very squishy, as it's easy to capitalize on the mistake of missing her skill shots, especially if you have poor positioning, as the reason why Zyra works so well in competitive team games is because the support players have pretty much perfect positioning, and that's likely not going to happen in solo queue. However, Zyra still does do the most damage of any support, and still has a strong kit, so she deserves a spot on tier 1, just much lower. After Zyra is Lux. Lux is actually higher than Zyra because she has shorter cooldowns and is slightly tankier. Despite not having an AoE CC ultimate, her kit is really strong too and only slightly outclasses Zyra. This placement was really tough to decide, but I think Lux is just a little bit more powerful, as she's simply just a little bit harder to outplay and kill. Now we can get into the more popular supports, with Nunu being next on the list. Nunu used to be god tier of course, but his nerfs have since pulled him down to a more realistic placement. However, although Nunu is definitely a tier 1 pick, he is kind of risky as it relies a lot on the skill of your AD carry, and if they are smart enough to kite properly. As if your AD carry can't kite correctly, Nunu will not be a very good pick. His Blood Boil and other parts of his kit are still really good though, so he's put on the bottom half of tier 1. Following Nunu is Sona. Sona is a lot weaker in solo queue than she is in team play for similar reasons to that of Zyra, and that she's fairly squishy and kind of easy to outplay in lane because of it. Her ultimate still is pretty much the best of any support though, and while she's the only support that can do everything as mentioned in the other tier list, she suffers by not being amazing at escaping ganks due to her squishiness, but she is still a very solid pick overall. After Sona comes Leona. Leona's kit is one that is very solid for solo queue, as it has a lot of hard CC, And although it's a skill shot, it's not too hard to hit, and since she's been around for a long time, people are used to playing with her. Leona is very good at setting up plays and forcing engages. She can be somewhat bursty and easily kited though, and has a few bad matchups, Lulu and Janna in particular, but she is still a very good pick in solo queue overall. Moving into the top 3, the bronze medal for solo queue supports goes to Blitzcrank. His grab is one of, if not the best ability in the entire game in terms of solo queue. A well-placed grab can destroy teamfights and easily carry games. However, because of nerfs, he has moved down just a little bit, and his laning phase is somewhat average now as he has a lot of counter picks to play against him. But as mentioned earlier, his grab is immensely powerful, as is his large amount of CC. Taking home the silver medal, we have Lulu. Lulu is the best support in the game at kiting and can easily carry games by getting your AD fed during her strong laning phase because she has high damage and high reliable CC, and can also solidly contribute to teamfights due to her kiting abilities. Lulu is solid in pretty much all aspects of the game, except for the fact that she lacks sustain and her Q is a skill shot, and those weaknesses really aren't that big of a deal, especially since sustain no longer wins bot lane. She does have a few minor counter picks in lane though, like Soraka, and that's why she's only second despite her amazing power. At the top of the solo queue tier list, we have, of course, Taric. Taric is absolutely phenomenal in solo queue, and that's why he has a 56.5% win ratio according to LoL King during the making of this video. There are two major factors that make Taric phenomenal in solo queue: consistency and reliability. Taric has consistency in that he has literally 0 bad matchups in lane, and is extremely easy to play with, especially because he's picked so often. And he has reliability because all of his skills are very discreet, and his stun is targeted, not to mention ranged of course, so that makes for a champion that's very easy to play with, and very, very hard to play against, due to his sustain and tankiness. Taric can also be played with pretty much any AD carry and perform well. His only real weakness is that he has mana issues and that his stun has a somewhat long cooldown. Overall though, Taric's kit gives him a lot of strengths and barely any weaknesses in solo queue play, making him a very strong champion to carry teams in solo queue. So, that's it for my solo queue tier list. This list was my best representation of how strong these support champions are in solo queue, and solo queue only. You may disagree with some of my placements, which is totally okay, so I'd love to discuss them with you in the comments. Also, I'd love it if you could support me with a like or some feedback in the comments, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer those in the comments too. I've been really stepping up how much I reply to comments lately, and I must say the talks have been a ton of fun. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content if you enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.